Tim slapped away the thermos I handed him. "I've been forced to marry you. Did you really think I'd fall in love with you?" That video went viral. Everyone knew that the newly risen superstar was forced into marriage, and I was like gum stuck to a shoe. That night after our film shoot, everyone ignored me as I was still tied to a tree. At dawn, I was finally untied, but as I made my way back in the dark, I slipped off a cliff. When I woke up, I was back 4 years ago, meeting someone who openly favored me. Tim wasn't happy about it. His sorrowful voice echoed through the hall. I froze. Feeling a piercing gaze from my side, I turned to see Tim bent over, glaring at me angrily. After a couple of seconds, he gritted out, "Mandy, can you show some respect?" I mechanically bent over, my mind in a whirl. Now, it was time to bid farewell to William's body. The host's voice echoed in my ears. This was my grandfather's funeral. What was going on? Didn't I just fall off a cliff? In the memory of the funeral, Tim hadn't talked to me in days. Someone grabbed my wrist. Tim leaned to my ear, mocking, "Spacing out at your grandfather's funeral? Can't even pretend to care now that he's gone." The pain and warmth in my wrist made me realize everything happening now was real. I had been reborn. Silently taking 3 deep breaths, I freed my hand and took a step aside, putting some distance between us. I bowed earnestly 3 more times. "Grandpa, I'm sorry, I don't have the courage to marry Tim again." We stood on the funeral home steps waiting for Tim's parents. The early spring sun was gentle. The fear and bitterness before my death felt like a lifetime ago. "Mandy, you really are fearless, huh?" Tim's cold voice came from the side. I turned to reassess the man who had lived in my heart since adolescence. Compared to his icy demeanor years later, he seemed a bit milder now. After knowing him for so many years, I still didn't understand why he hated me so much. "My grandpa wanted me to marry you. Are you pleased with yourself?" He sneered. "Are you?" I cut him off. "No need." "What?" His brow furrowed. That night in the woods was so cold. The pain in my belly felt like it was stabbing my temples with icy daggers. The next day when I was rescued, my legs were so numb I couldn't stand. While waiting for blood to return to them, my mind replayed the conversation where our secret marriage was exposed. I finally understood Tim was a block of ice I couldn't melt. "I'm saying, we won't get married." I looked him straight in the eye. "Tim, I won't chase after you anymore. I'll find a new place and move out soon." He took a sudden step towards me. "Mandy, what are you up to? For both our sakes, I'll stay away from you as much as possible." Tim was stunned for a moment, then his lips curled in a mocking smile. "Playing hard to get?" I shook my head, but before I could say anything, Tim's parents walked up quickly. Their eyes were still red, frequently glancing towards the farewell hall. In the end, they sighed and waved us over. "Let's go, we'll take you back." In the car, Tim's mom poked my face and turned to him. "How many times do I have to tell you to take good care of Mandy? She's lost so much weight recently." Tim stared out the window, deep in thought. I grabbed her hand. "I'm not losing weight, and it has nothing to do with him." She ignored me and patted Tim's shoulder. "I'm talking to you." "Huh?" Tim turned back to look at us. I said, "Be nicer to your future wife." Tim's impatience was evident. I quickly intervened. "I won't marry Tim." She was shocked. "Why not?" I glanced at Tim, who looked angrier for some reason. "It's just freedom to love, right? He doesn't like me, and I don't like him. We won't be happy." She looked skeptical. After all, even the family dog knew I liked Tim. "Did you guys fight?" she asked. No, I replied. "You've been living together for years, you know each other well. Give it a try," she persisted. No need to try. I had exhausted every effort in my past life. In the front seat, there was a loud bang as Tim threw a water bottle into the glove box. We were both juniors in college, and Tim and I were starting to audition. For convenience, his parents had rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near the school for us. Since I'd already lived with his family for years, he didn't refuse when they suggested we move in together. We lived there for 2 years and got married during that time. Compared to the fancy apartment Tim bought later, that rental felt more like home. At least back then, we still ate meals together often. Remembering something, I pulled out my phone. The online shopping cart was filled with housewares I hadn't had a chance to order. During this timeline, we had just rented the place, and I was eager to make it homier. Now, it seemed unnecessary. I emptied the cart. Looking to the driver, I said, "Uncle, let me off at the next intersection, I need to visit a friend." While waiting earlier, I'd scrolled through Twitter and saw someone in a neighboring dorm had a house for rent near the school. I messaged her and arranged to see it that afternoon. At the street corner, I saw a familiar yet distant classmate. "Amy, over here." She waved. She casually linked her arm through mine, a gesture that felt nostalgic. After years of struggling in the entertainment industry, I'd forgotten what it felt like to walk arm in arm with a friend. "Why the daydreaming?" "I'm talking to you," she teased, shaking my arm. "What were you saying?" I asked. "The house belongs to my brother. We'd better go tell him." On the way, my mind was flooded with memories from my past life. By the time I snapped back to reality, we were already greeted by laughter and cheers. "You actually didn't bet on Evan? A month of hot pot is mine." Evan's arm muscles have improved lately. Amy excitedly dragged me forward. "Another match? How many meals are we betting this time?" "Amy's here." The crowd parted. I looked up to see a man leaning casually against the boxing ring's corner post, adjusting his gloves slowly. When he noticed us, he smirked mischievously. His audacious gaze made me instinctively want to look away. Sensing my discomfort, he finally turned to Amy. "Why aren't you in school? What are you doing here again?" Amy dragged me to the edge of the boxing ring. "You've been kicked out of your house, so you must be short on money, right? I rented out that small apartment upstairs for you." "Who told you to?" Before he could finish, Amy pushed me forward. "Your tenant." Thinking about Evan's earlier interrupted sentence, I feared he might not want to rent out his place, and Amy could be making this decision on her own. So, I waved my hand. "If it's not convenient for you, It is." He blurted out. "Can I see the place today then?" Evan stood up straight, shook his wrists and ankles, and started warming up. "You can, but do you want to place a bet first?" Amy motioned to a small table nearby. "It's a friendly match within their club. Bet on the right person, and you'll win something big." I was about to refuse, but Amy yanked me over to the table. Holding the sticky note in my hand, I glanced back at the boxing ring. Unexpectedly, I locked eyes with Evan again. He smiled and mouthed 2 words, "Bet on me." My face felt a bit warm. In my past life, Mandy only had eyes for Tim. Even in a department full of handsome guys, she never noticed anyone else. This was the first time I realized that good looks are really pleasing to both the eyes and the heart. I couldn't help but smile and gave him an okay gesture. Then I tossed the slip with my name into the box labeled Evan. This was my first time watching a live boxing match. All my cells were on high alert with every move they made. While the guys were sparring in the ring, the men below were just as animated. Amy and I got so excited, our clenched hands gripped tighter and tighter. Finally, when Evan's fist swiftly landed on his opponent's jaw again, the referee yelled, "Stop." Amy squealed, then leaned into my ear. To be honest, only when I see my brother boxing can I ignore his usual bossiness and admit he's super handsome. Following her words, I looked towards the ring. Evan had already taken off his headgear, his hair slightly messy, and sweat dripping from his forehead. But even like this, he was strikingly handsome, full of vitality and charisma. The men around had already gathered at the ring, chatting away. "Evan, have you been secretly practicing butterfly steps lately? Were you guys just trading blows in the second half?" Evan absent-mindedly fiddled with his gloves, nodding perfunctorily as if to satisfy his buddies. Suddenly, he turned and looked over, eyes glinting with pride. He mouthed silently, "One." That look felt like those words were meant just for me. It must be my imagination. Amy cheerfully held onto my arm. We get to score free food again today. Joy seemed contagious, and I laughed with her. Then I pulled her aside. You guys go eat. Can I check out the apartment by myself? Let's eat together first, then check out the place, and have my brother drive you back. No, I don't know anyone. You'll know them after a meal. Forget it. Before I could finish, a male voice from behind cut in. Don't want to go? Evan had somehow appeared behind us. Talking to him made me inexplicably nervous, but I was really not in the mood for a group meal, so I was honest. If it's okay, can I check out the apartment by myself? Don't worry, I won't mess with anything. Come on, let's eat. Please. Amy pleaded, shaking my arm. The next second, Evan grabbed her by her hoodie, making her step back. Amy shook free and glared at her brother. What are you doing? Evan lazily glanced at her. She said she didn't want to go. Why are you being so noisy? I just wanted to take Mandy for some good food. Evan mused quietly for a moment at the name Mandy and then chuckled softly. He then hooked his arm around Amy's neck and began to walk away but turned back to me. Give me 2 minutes. When they returned, Evan veered off to a nearby table to talk to some of his buddies. Amy, holding her phone and grinning from ear to ear, looped her arm through mine and pointed to the door. Let's go check out the place. I was about to ask what Evan had said to her, but then I heard a round of teasing from the resting table. Evan quickly glanced at us and then shouted to the table, shut up. But strange looks kept coming our way. Are these people okay? The apartment is indeed in a prime location, a 15-minute walk to the school at most. At the door, I noticed it had a password lock, so I turned my back to it, waiting for Evan to input the code. Amy turned away with me, and I asked puzzled, what are you doing? She puckered her lips and said sarcastically, my own brother has never let me know his house password. Imagine if something happened to him, I wouldn't even be able to get in to clean up. Just as she finished, Evan grabbed the back of her neck, making her back down instantly. But my brother is so healthy, nothing will happen, so I have to respect his privacy, right? In my past life, I was only casual friends with Amy and didn't know her well. I had no idea she had this quirky personality. Evan chuckled at her words, let go, then nodded towards the door. Go in, Mandy. I looked around the apartment and saw it had a good layout for a one-bedroom place. But the interior had a somewhat cold and stark feel, no colors except varying shades of gray and pure black. Seeing my eyes wander between the sofa and the floor-to-ceiling curtains, Evan asked, don't like it? I quickly waved my hand. No, it's great. Based on the reasonable rent he offered, how could I not be satisfied? Evan was silent for a few seconds, then asked, when are you moving in? I'll pick you up, no need. I thought about it. There are still things at school the next couple of days, so I can probably move in around the weekend. I'll call a cab myself. He didn't say anything further. Instead, he pulled out his contact info and stuck it in front of me. All right, we'll sign the contract when you move in. Let's sign it now. Evan was taken aback. Is now inconvenient? No, you'll just have to wait a bit. He glanced at his watch. About 10 minutes? I nodded. Evan rushed out, then came back in 2 seconds to pull Amy away. Left alone, I was a bit bored. Since I hadn't moved in yet, I felt it wouldn't be right to snoop around, so I went to the balcony. Leaning on the railing, I watched people coming and going below. I felt like crying. It's so good to be alive again. It's so good to be reborn at a time when everything can be fixed. When my eyes were starting to get teary, a fast-running figure dashed into the building. Evan soon appeared, out of breath. He waved a paper in his hand, smiling, got it. Let's sign the contract. I was stunned for a couple of seconds. This landlord seems a bit too eager. We signed on the move-in date, and I transferred the deposit to Evan. My heart finally settled down. I had taken the first step away from Tim. The enthusiastic landlord insisted on driving me home. Outside the complex, I closed the car door and said to Evan through the rolled-down window, thanks for the ride. He smiled, no problem, see you, Mandy. This guy seems to love smiling. Every time he spoke, the corners of his lips would curl up, making you feel good without knowing why. The complete opposite of Tim. As soon as I started thinking about the comparison, I spotted a familiar figure sitting by the flower bed. It was Tim. From a distance, with the streetlights dim, I couldn't see his expression. Walking over, I saw he was empty-handed, not like he was out to buy anything, and asked curiously, "What are you doing here?" After a while, no reply. Not wanting to feel awkward, I turned to leave, but my arm was suddenly grabbed. He lifted his eyelids. Who was that guy? My new landlord. Tim suddenly stood up. Are you really moving out? Mandy, you sure are something. When Grandpa was alive, you pretended to be all sweet to him. Now that he's just passed, you're not only not sad but also breaking your promise. I was speechless. The one who loved me the most had passed away, and I was in deep pain. In those past years, whenever I felt extreme sadness from my messy situation with Tim, I'd always go to Grandpa's grave for some one-sided communication. I gradually accepted Grandpa's passing and began to believe he was still with me in a different way, but these emotional changes were something Tim, with our 4-year time difference, couldn't understand. I didn't explain further, just said, "It's not appropriate for us to live together anymore." What's inappropriate? You've been living in my house for years. It's different. It was okay with Uncle and Aunt around, but just the two of us will lead to misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Tim repeated, then sneered, "Mandy, weren't all the misunderstandings about us caused by you?" I bowed my head. Indeed, that was true. Because I liked Tim, I chased his grades in high school and followed him to drama school and college. I even entered an acting major I wasn't interested in just to be close to him. People joked that Tim brought his little wife to school. He probably never outright rejected me, maybe out of courtesy. But in his heart, he must have found me annoying. I'm sorry, I won't do it anymore. I'll move out as soon as possible. Tim grabbed my shoulders roughly. Mandy, playing hard to get won't work on me. I'm not playing games. I said, last week, I overheard Linda talking to you. Being reborn, I can't remember conversations from 4 years ago. Stop pretending. Tim exerted more force. She wasn't giving you tips on how to make me realize your importance by ignoring me for a while? I tried to recall but couldn't. Back then, everyone, seeing how infatuated I was, had a few laughs and tips to give me. I never took them seriously. Let go, it hurts. I wriggled, and Tim released his grip. I rubbed my shoulders and said sincerely, Tim, liking you is too exhausting. I give up. Though this life might not repeat the last, I can't disregard the real pain I once experienced. Forcing a smile, I said, really, you? Seeing his cold expression, I didn't finish. He walked away in long strides. After he left, I completed my sentence, you can marry the girl you like, and I'll live a truly happy life. The living room was pitch black, and Tim's bedroom door was shut. I moved quietly and quickly took a shower. Just as I lay down, a message from Evan popped up. By the way, the current code for the house is 202200712. I paused. 0712 is Tim's birthday. What a coincidence. They don't know each other, so it must just be a coincidence. Evan probably chose that date because it's special to him. But I don't want to think of Tim every time I unlock the door. After thinking it over, I messaged, can I change the code after I move in? He replied instantly, of course, for security, you should. The message box showed him typing for a while. But nothing more came through. I sent an emoji and turned off my phone, preparing to sleep. With too much on my mind, I couldn't fall asleep despite tossing and turning for a while. I remembered that night in the woods. By then, Tim had starred in 2 hit romantic dramas and 1 high-rated serious drama. He was hailed as a promising new top star by the media. More and more scripts were being offered to him, and I saw less of him. So when his agent brought an unlikable villain role, I didn't refuse. The male lead was Tim. For years, he shot films without a single scandal involving an actress. Considering both of our career paths, I don't see anything wrong with a hidden marriage. But on set that day, I saw Tim interacting with the leading actress. I didn't mean to pry, but as I brought some soup over, I couldn't help but ask, "What were you and Laura talking about today? You seemed so happy." He looked indifferent. Jealous? Of course, I was jealous. But I was afraid Tim would say I didn't trust him, so I didn't admit it. I shook my head and smiled. "I know you always handle things properly, I believe in you." I handed him the thermos. "Mom spent a long time making this soup, she specially sent it over. You should try it." Before I even finished speaking, Tim knocked the thermos over, and it rolled to the side. "Now you're using Mom to pressure me too?" "Mandy, sometimes I feel you're more like my parents' real child than I am, so what does that make me?" I was stunned on the spot. The elders of the family were always good to me, but that was because... I pressed my lips together and forced out the words, "You know they pity me." Tim sneered, "Good that you know." Then he leaned in and whispered in my ear, "They pitied you and forced me to marry you." "What, are you hoping I might actually fall in love with you now?" It was noon, the sun was shining brightly, yet his words made me feel completely cold. After Tim left, I picked up the now dirty thermos with trembling hands and hugged it, unable to hold back my tears. There were no scenes to shoot in the afternoon, so I took some time to adjust my mood alone in a secluded place. When I returned to the set's lounge, my agent grabbed me. "Why didn't you tell me you married Tim?" She was scrolling through her phone. "Something's happened." The video on the screen was shaky, but it clearly captured me and Tim's faces, as well as our entire conversation from noon. I numbly scrolled through the comments. What kind of background does she have to force our idol to marry her? Bitch is even acting wronged, what's she crying about? Your fate will be like that thermos, discarded, you hear? I wiped my face and handed the phone back to my agent. "I'm going to find Tim." I already did. Tim said we don't need to do anything, he'll handle it. No, I need to speak to him face to face. Tim is busy all afternoon, he's already filming. I stopped in my tracks, feeling my heart sink a little deeper. How unconcerned must he be to remain so calm? During that evening's night shoot, from the moment I arrived till I was fully made up, I felt the staff's various gazes on me. Some were pitiful, some disdainful, and others outright contemptuous. Some even openly discussed me nearby. I thought I might get a chance to speak to Tim before rolling cameras, but no such luck. I'd been tied to a tree for quite a while when he and the leading actress finally showed up. That day, the ropes were especially tight, and the rag in my mouth had a strong, foul smell. I felt like crying, but Tim was acting like nothing had happened, casually chatting and laughing with the lead actress. This scene was a continuation of last night's shoot. I, the villainous supporting character, had been caught by the leads and was tied up to the side while they joked about who had first uncovered my plot. It was a scene where their relationship grew, and ironically, it mirrored my real situation perfectly. I didn't even need to act, my bitterness and humiliation were real and overflowing. The three of us performed well, and the scene passed in one take. Before Tim left, he glanced at me and seemed to frown, but he said nothing and walked away. The rag was shoved deep into my mouth, and I groaned, signaling for the crew to untie me, but they all pretended not to hear. By the time I wriggled the rank rag out with my tongue, the set had already emptied. The nights in the mountains were especially cold, the chill combined with menstrual cramps pounding at my temples. Silent tears streamed down my face as I finally understood. In one-sided love, neither time nor sincerity matters. I also decided to divorce Tim once I got back. I don't know how long passed before the set crew came to change the scene. Oh my God. What set are you from? How'd you end up tied here? A man helped untie me, and I stumbled into his arms. What is this? You're like ice. Come on, I'll take you back. I slumped. No need, I'll rest here a bit on my own. They had to set the scene in a limited time, or they'd face penalties. I didn't want to delay their work. The man draped his coat over me, then came back with a thermos cup. This is all I've got, hope you don't mind. Warm yourself up. Thank you. I took it, warming my hands and sipping slowly. You rest here. I'll get to work. Shout if you need help, and I'll take you back." I nodded. Once I felt less numb, I put the thermos and coat aside and quietly left. It was still dark at around 4 or 5 in the morning. My body was weaker than I'd thought, and I stumbled. When I opened my eyes again, I was in another life. I'd never truly had a home. At 10, I was adopted from an orphanage. My adoptee asked me to call her aunt, not mom. She told me bluntly that her daughter had died of a severe illness and her husband had an accident at work. Adopting me was her way to have something to live for. She sent me to good schools, bought me new clothes. But she always treated me like a guest, too polite and distant. We barely spoke beyond necessary communication. In those days, my best friend was the old man next door, William. He'd watch TV with me, share the latest stickers, eat snacks, and endlessly brag about his grandson, Tim. From him, I learned that the aunt's husband and Tim's father both worked at the same chemical research institute. The families were always close. That night they had both been on duty. During the time Tim's dad went out to grab a meal, there was an explosion in the high-pressure reactor. Auntie had an older daughter years ago, but she had a congenital heart disease and didn't live past the age of 5. After her husband had the accident, Auntie completely broke down, as if she had aged 20 years overnight. During that time, Grandpa was annoyed by Tim's parents criticizing his living habits. He was thinking about moving out or finding a nursing home. After the incident, Grandpa directly rented the vacant apartment next to Auntie's place. On one hand, he gained his freedom, on the other, he could check in on Auntie. Tim's parents had nothing to say about this. I was just a kid back then, even knowing everything, there wasn't much I could do. I clumsily tried cooking for Auntie. She would smile and pat my head but didn't eat much. I dragged her to the square to play, but she sat in a corner zoning out. At night, going to the bathroom, I could see light spilling out from her room and hear her restless turning. Helpless, I asked Grandpa Q for advice. He sighed. "No way out, kiddo. The blow of losing close family back to back is a long and heavy one. You've done great already. Turns out, I didn't do well enough." A year later, Auntie took her own life. She drank some highly toxic pesticide, leaving no room for rescue. When I got home from school and saw her, she was already gone. Later, Grandpa came over, covered my eyes, and took me to his place. He called Tim's parents to handle the aftermath. Then, William took me to Tim's house. He spent a long time convincing his uncle and aunt to take me in. And that's how I got my second home after the orphanage. Tim's unfriendly attitude made me anxious, but thinking of all the praise Grandpa gave him, I figured it must be because we weren't familiar yet. I was so well behaved, surely, once we got to know each other, we'd get along. I was wrong. Sniffling, I sat up and realized my pillow was soaked with tears. I calmed myself down, comforting my heart. "Mandy, it's all right. Heaven's been kind, giving you another chance at life. You'll be happy for sure." Pulling myself together, I grabbed my phone to check the time. I saw Evan had sent a new message. There were 2 withdrawn messages, not sure what he'd said. The remaining one was, "Mandy, my house says it's excited if you come live in it." I didn't have much stuff, packing was easy. Tim was coming and going early the past few days, we barely saw each other. That Saturday morning, I dragged my packed suitcase and 2 large bags to the living room. Then I went to clean the bedroom. As I turned back from wiping the nightstand, Tim standing at the door startled me. He was staring at the now empty desk beside the bed softly. I said, "I'll call for a ride once I'm done packing." "Did you tell my parents?" "Not yet, I'll call them after I move today." Tim sneered, "Do you even have money for rent?" "Yes." "Where'd you get the money?" "We paid your tuition." Because I didn't like socializing, I started writing online years ago, making some money here and there. Every penny they spent on me, I kept a meticulous record of. I even had a bank account specifically for repayment, planning to save enough to pay Tim's parents back all at once. Not wanting to explain further, I vaguely said, "I will pay Uncle and Aunt back." This made Tim angry, So you're cutting ties with my family now? No. Just with you. I bit my lip. You all are my family, always will be. Tim fell silent. Seeing he had nothing more to say, I prepared to go rinse the rag. As I passed by him, he spoke, Mandy, why do you seem like a different person? Because I literally died once. I forced a smile, maybe God touched my head and woke me up. The room was almost clean. An unfamiliar number called. Before I could speak, the voice on the other end smiled, Mandy, all packed? I'm here to pick you up. Realizing it was Evan, I couldn't help smiling, no need, I'll take a cab. But I'm already outside your complex. So enthusiastic, this landlord. Which building, which floor? I'll come help you with your bags. Thinking about how hard it'd be to drag all my things to the gate, I agreed, alright, but no need to come upstairs, just wait by building 3, unit 1, I'll be down in 10 minutes. Hanging up, I knocked on Tim's slightly ajar bedroom door. Tim, I'm leaving. Take care, eat well. As expected, no response. Taking one last look around the house, I pushed my bags out. The elevator opened, and as I struggled with the large bag, it got lighter. It was Evan. I was stunned. I'd said 10 minutes because building 3 was in the far end of our complex. It'd take a while to walk over. Getting here by the next elevator, he must have run. Evan slid my suitcase over and took a bag in each hand, tilting his head with a smile, let's go. Since my window faced this side, I instinctively glanced up as we walked out. Surprisingly, I saw Tim. For a split second before he turned away. Tim, from now on, you're just my brother. I whispered in my heart. Evan drove a cool-looking pickup truck. But my few belongings in the large truck bed seemed like overkill. He raised an eyebrow. I thought girls had lots of stuff, so I borrowed a big ride. Thanks. As we hit the main road, Evan said lightly, Mandy, you're too polite. We're friends now, no need to keep thanking me. I smiled but stayed quiet. Growing up in foster care, politeness was my way of survival. Seeing Amy and Evan joke around so freely, I felt envious but also knew that it was something I'd never have. Like them? I realized the light had turned red when I heard Evan's voice. Following his gaze, I noticed the pink toy on the dashboard. I was zoning out, so my eyes probably wandered to that pink spot. Do I like it? Not really. I never had my own toys, so whenever I see one, I just stare for a bit longer. So I casually commented, it's pretty cute. This is my friend's car. It's probably his girlfriend's, Evan replied nonchalantly. What's your favorite color? We were just making small talk to pass the time. Light green, I guess. It's a mood booster. Maybe I was imagining it, but Evan seemed to let out a small sigh of relief as the light turned green. I didn't want to distract him while he was driving, so I stayed quiet. When we got to the apartment, Evan had his hands full, so I just entered the passcode and opened the door. Turning the corner at the entryway, I was stunned. The place looked completely different from when I last saw it. The floor-to-ceiling curtains were now a linen mint green, with a layer of soft white sheer on top. The sofa was the same color, decorated with a few Morandi-toned cushions. In front of the sofa, there was a white cashmere rug. There was even a fresh bouquet on the coffee table. I walked into the bedroom in a daze, finding it completely transformed as well. The window seat, which used to be cluttered, was now cleaned and covered with a plush mint green blanket, surrounded by stuffed animals I didn't recognize. There was a new lamp on the nightstand, more decorative than functional. There was even a new vanity set up. Evan quietly spoke from behind me, welcome home, Mandy. My eyes welled up. Evan, how did you know what color I like? I guessed. Smart, right? Mandy. Amy burst in, interrupting my thoughts. She proudly gestured around the room. I helped decorate. Do you like it? Relieved, I realized it was Amy's idea. It's great, thank you. Once you're settled in, how about we eat here? Amy tugged my arm. Evan shot her a look. All you think about is food? Yep. So what? She countered, smirking. Chuckling, I cut in, sure, we can have hot pot later. Yay. Amy leaned in for a hug, but Evan pulled her back. Do you ever stop? Defiantly, she replied, I won't let go. What are you gonna do? She turned to me, Mandy, I need to tell you, but couldn't finish as Evan covered her mouth and started dragging her out. Mandy, take your time settling in. We'll head out. After they left, I sat on the couch, staring into space for a long time. For the first time, someone genuinely welcomed me into a home. Even though it was just a rental. Even though the landlord was just being kind. I felt a small but real sense of happiness. The place was sparkling clean, probably thanks to a cleaning service Evan hired. I took out my things and quickly settled in. After eating the takeout I ordered, I called Auntie and Uncle after their nap. Hi Auntie, are you busy? No, what's up? I found a new place and moved out. Just letting you know. Why? Did you and Tim have a fight? Or is the place uncomfortable? No, we're both adults now. It's inappropriate to live together. Auntie sighed, okay, how much is the rent? We'll cover it, no need, I hurriedly replied. I've been saving up from part-time jobs. I'm fine. Make sure to let us know if you need help. Not long after, a classmate texted me. Mandy, the new drama you were curious about is casting. There's a role perfect for you and Tim. Go for it. Looking at the flyer, I felt a mix of emotions. In my past life, I worked so hard to stand by Tim's side. Thanks, but could you also send this to Tim? I replied to my classmate before trying to sort out my thoughts. I didn't like the politics and surface-level relationships in the acting industry. I wasn't passionate about acting either. This time, I wouldn't pursue acting. Instead, I'd continue writing, something I had to put on hold for acting. I'm not sure if I'll succeed, but at least it won't kill me. And I'll feel more at peace. This time, I'll follow my heart. Watching the curtains flutter in the breeze, I felt a newfound sense of freedom and peace. The next morning, I went out for a jog. To my surprise, I ran into Evan in the elevator. What are you doing here? Why are you up so early? We both said at once. He pointed up, I live upstairs. I thought the place was small, so my family bought a 2-bedroom upstairs. I paused for a second, is that what it's like to be rich? He chuckled, used to be my life. Didn't Amy tell you? I got kicked out. Why? I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. Being a pro boxer doesn't count. To a capitalist, anything that doesn't make money fast is useless. As we chatted, we walked out of the building. I waved to Evan and was about to head off. Before I could, he grabbed my hoodie, pulling me back. Where are you going? Running. Here. He pointed around the neighborhood. Evan fixed my hoodie, Mandy, you're adorable. Come, I'll take you to a better spot. Following him, I discovered a hidden park behind our neighborhood. Evan warmed up quickly, smirking. Want a race? No way. You're a pro, I'm just jogging. He tilted his head, okay, I'll catch up with you later. 15 minutes in, I finally understood what he meant. I was halfway through my run when Evan lapped me. He turned and flashed a smile that screamed, aren't I great? The third time he caught up, he was still breathing easy, while I was a mess. This is supposed to be professional level? This time, Evan didn't just run past me. Instead, he turned around about a meter in front of me and started running backward, facing me. Mandy, how do you think I am at boxing? I was too out of breath to reply. Come on, tell me, what did you think of my match last time? Mandy, why aren't you saying anything? The vibration from my fitness tracker indicated I finally hit my goal distance. I stopped, taking a few seconds to catch my breath before speaking. Evan, what do you really want to say? He kept jogging in place. I have a state match next month, want to come watch? The sun had just clocked in, spreading a hazy golden light on his smiling face, making it almost blinding. It must have been the sunlight that kept me from outright saying no. What day? Where? Evan stopped moving, the smile on his face widening. You're coming? The look of genuine expectation on his face made me nod before my brain even caught up. Evan took a quick step toward me, but stopped himself just short of hugging me. Then, seeming to realize something, he smiled sheepishly, quickly backed up, and went back to his running. I didn't even get to finish my sentence. I was drenched in sweat and exhausted. I went straight home to shower, and just as I got out, I saw a message from Evan. Besides time and location, it also said, Amy's coming too. That last bit of hesitation vanished, and I typed back smiling, all right. Though my body is 4 years younger, my mind is affected by those 4 years. It's also the timing. Frequent auditions kept interrupting my writing. Getting back into it was tough. It took me about 2 weeks to find my groove. But not having to run around for different shoots gave me some needed downtime. Amy claims she has no grand ambitions and isn't planning on making it in the entertainment industry. She's happy just being a small influencer making some pocket money. So she had plenty of free time and often came over. If it wasn't to watch Evan train, she'd drag me to her brother's club for gatherings. I grew closer with the siblings. One day, instead of going to school, I really wanted a pork chop meal from the second dining hall. So, I messaged Amy. Coming over today? Instead of the usual got time for me? Meme, she just answered, busy? I want the black pepper pork chop from the dining hall. Hanging with Amy so much has made me comfortable enough to whine online. After a long pause, she merely replied, okay. I thought Amy would arrive quickly, but over an hour passed and she still wasn't here. I was starving, so I grabbed my phone to type, if you're busy, don't worry about it, Before I finished, the doorbell rang. I rushed over and opened the door, finally. Wait, it's you? Evan smiled and raised a bag, your pork chop meal. I was just about to say more when the house phone rang. Worried it was the professor I spoke with this morning, I quickly told Evan, come in, will ya? Then I hurried to the sofa. Seeing Tim's name on the screen made me pause. We hadn't spoken much at school lately, and he felt like a distant memory. I swiped to answer, ready to greet him. But Tim's angry voice shouted at me, why didn't you come to the audition? What? For manifestation of love, why didn't you show up? That's the role I asked someone to help me get. I'm not acting anymore. After a brief silence, Tim raised his voice, Mandy, don't be stubborn. I'm not being stubborn. I seriously thought about it, and acting isn't for me. Tim, you keep it up though. Mandy. If you can't commit to anything, don't start it. He shouted before hanging up. I didn't get it. Without me tagging along, shouldn't he be happy? Boyfriend? Evan suddenly asked. Nope. I took the bag from him. Why are you delivering it? Who was that then? Amy. I told her about it. I mean, who was on the phone? In that moment, Evan had that same intense look as when we first met. Avoiding his stare, I walked to the dining table with my meal, my brother. I didn't know you had a brother. There's a lot you don't know. Evan sat across from me and took the lid off my meal. I'm leaving for training camp tomorrow. Mandy, we won't see each other for over 2 weeks. I won't have much phone time either. I didn't know how to respond, so I grabbed the tray, trying to pull it back. Evan, seeming to challenge me, wouldn't let go. Was that guy really your brother? I got a bit annoyed and looked up. He was my husband in a past life, okay? Can I be the one in this life? I felt a jolt, and Evan suddenly let go the tray tipped toward me. Faced with the pork chop, my heart pounded, and I dared to not look up. Evan sighed and said, I'm serious. You should go running later in the morning. It's too dark otherwise and unsafe. No matter your work habits, eat regular meals. Always lock your door before bed. Power outages are rare here, but if one happens, call Amy to keep you company. Don't tough it out alone if you're scared. Seeing my silence, he got up, "See ya, at the match." That pork chop must have had a new chef because I tasted a hint of sweetness in the black pepper that day. On the weekend, I visited Uncle and Auntie at their house, not expecting to see Tim there too. I'd barely said hello to Auntie in the living room when he walked out of the bedroom, looking unusually flushed. "You have a fever?" Without answering, he headed for the kitchen. Auntie hurriedly got up, pushing Tim onto the sofa. "There's water by your bed. You're at 102F. Tell us what you need, don't wander around." She went to the kitchen to get water. I passed my audition. Tim's voice was hoarse. "I'll be on set mid-next month." "Congrats. There's still one supporting role left. Do you want it?" "I don't want it." I cut him off. "I'm serious, acting's not for me." Tim frowned. "You worked so hard before. Why quit now?" I shook my head. "Tim, this isn't quitting for me. It's a new beginning." "What about me?" His eyes showed emotions I couldn't decipher. "What do you mean?" Just then, Auntie came back with water and a fruit tray. I rushed over to take them. When I turned back, Tim had already stood up, walking unsteadily back to his room. I suddenly realized that in my past life, the most I saw of Tim was his back. Like he said, Evan was totally quiet for more than half a month. Then, just a day before the match, he suddenly messaged, "You there yet?" At that moment, Amy and I had just checked into the hotel. I replied to him, and he went silent again. While Amy and I were taking the elevator down to find some food, I remembered Evan's instructions at my place. I nudged her shoulder. "Did you tell your brother I'm afraid of the dark?" "How would I know?" "He told me." "How did he know?" "When you moved, didn't you invite us over for dinner?" "He said he noticed it then." Amy shrugged. "I'm not sure, maybe it's some kind of radar." "What radar?" Amy leaned in mysteriously. "Mandy, I got a confidentiality fee, sorry." Then she made a zipping motion across her lips. The next day at the venue, I was surprised to see fewer people than I expected. Amy didn't seem fazed. "It's always like this. In this line of work, until you peak, there's not much applause or money." She looked around. "Today's crowd is actually good, since it's the finals." "So, there've been other matches before?" "He said you only needed to see the finals. Is he that confident he'd make it?" Men and their blind confidence. I chuckled at this, and Amy suddenly lifted her phone. "Hey, Mandy, look at the camera." Before long, I saw Evan on stage with his coach, getting his gear on. I watched intently. When the referee walked over to check Evan's gear, he glanced our way. His mouth seemed to move. Even with the mouthguard on, making it unclear, I felt he wanted to say the same thing as when we first met, "Pick me." My face started to feel warm. "A ring, first round, match start." The announcer's voice boomed. My heart was in my throat. The clash of skill and strength ensued. The crowd's excitement was palpable. In the midst of their cheers, I realized the crowd size didn't matter. Passion itself was applause. A ring, first round, match end. The 3 minutes were up. Seeing the scores from the 5 judges on the big screen, Evan was in the lead. Back on stage, Evan was listening intently to his coach. 1 minute rest over. The announcer, "A ring, second round, match begin." Though I didn't understand most referee hand signals, from the surrounding chatter and scores, it seemed Evan was evenly matched with his opponent. By the end of the 7th round, I heard a man behind me say confidently, "Evan's got this." After the 8th and final round, I straightened up in my seat. The ref stood between the fighters, holding their hands. I was recording everything, zooming in with my phone. As the ref raised Evan's hand, he turned, smiling, mouthing, "Won again." In that moment, his question from the other day resurfaced in my mind. My heart fluttered. Almost instinctively, I lowered my phone. Amy was by my side, teasing, "Mandy, why are you blushing at a boxing match?" Just then, my phone vibrated. It was Tim. A random message, "Where are you?" "Out of town." "Is Amy's brother your new landlord?" What's between you and him? His questions puzzled me, remembering how Amy kept snapping photos. I checked Twitter. Sure enough, Amy had posted several things. There was a video too, captioned, "Mandy cheering for Evan." The video showed me like a geek, fixated on the ring, constantly zooming, then cutting to Evan's smiling face. Amy poked my smiling face. "Look at you." Tim's message popped up again. "Your birthday's soon. Plans? You have a birthday coming up." Amy noticed as well. I murmured a confirmation. All those years, including our past marriage, to not trouble his family, I always said I didn't want to celebrate. Tim and his parents picked up on this and stopped mentioning it. Only Grandpa would insist on taking me out, always making sure I made a wish. Tim never celebrated my birthday. So I stuck with my old line, "Don't want to." Tim's new response was firm. "No way, we must celebrate. Come to the usual spot, or I'm not leaving." After that, he ignored any messages I sent. Amy went to the restroom, leaving me waiting outside the venue for her and Evan. Suddenly, something heavy landed around my neck. I looked down to see a gleaming gold medal. Evan walked around from behind me. "Long time no see, Mandy." It really did feel like forever. I laughed, trying to take off the medal, but Evan grabbed my wrist. "It's yours." "Why me?" "Your reward." I chuckled. "I didn't do anything. Just you being there is enough." Whose heart was racing now? In the silence, I couldn't even lift my head. Then Amy rushed over, saving me. She linked arms with me, turning to Evan. "Mandy's birthday is soon. Let's throw a party." Evan stepped between us, bending down to ask, "Next week, right? Would a party be too loud?" I used to think it would, but now, I found myself longing for such excitement. I smiled back. I could give it a try. Evan looked at me, eyes clear and eager, lowering his voice. "I have something to tell you then." Damn it, I'm neither blind nor deaf. Amy shouted nearby. Come my birthday, the festiveness exceeded my expectations. Because it was at Evan's club, everyone was involved. Pointing to a pile of gift boxes in the corner, I asked Amy, "Are those just for decoration?" "No, those are everyone's presents for you. We barely know each other. This feels too much." Amy laughed. "Silly, this is the first time my brother has gone all out for a girl. Those are his buddies. They know he values you, so they sent those gifts." She pulled me inside. "The gifts aren't expensive, but they'll show you how quirky their minds are. Come on, come on. Is the cake ready? Is it in place?" Her voice was chaotic but oddly comforting. Evan put down the drinks he was organizing and came over. "Don't worry, we didn't set up any complicated rituals. Just make a wish, and then we can all have dinner together, okay?" I was distracted by the crooked wall decorations and didn't answer immediately. Evan sounded a bit nervous when he spoke again. "I just want them to meet you. If you're uncomfortable, we can leave now." "No, it's fine," I said, pointing at the wall with a smile. "I just wanted to say your decorating skills are pretty, unique." Evan let out a sigh of relief and led me to the dining table, pretending to be casual. His palm was sweaty even over a few meters. "Come on, put the hat on." Big Bro handed one over and went to open the cake box too quickly, smudging a big piece of the cake. "Were you that hungry?" He looked apologetic. I felt all my earlier nerves dissolve and waved it off with a laugh. "No worries, it doesn't ruin the eating. Let's light the candles." To the tune of a very off-key happy birthday song, I made a wish for my first birthday in this new chapter of my life. During the lively meal, my phone on the table suddenly blinked several times. It was Tim. 2 hours ago, he sent me a picture of an abandoned school entrance. I ignored it, thinking he would leave if I didn't show up, but the newest message was a photo of the view from a rooftop. "Mandy, I had a nightmare last night where I did a lot of bad things to you. If I jump from here, will it make up for it?" My hands shook, spilling juice. Evan, sitting next to me, saw the message and grabbed some napkins to clean the juice off my dress. "I'll take you there." After calling the police, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What if something really happened to Tim? His parents couldn't handle that, they'd lose it. No matter how Tim treated me, they were kind enough to raise me. I couldn't let any tragedy happen because of me. While I was lost in thought, Evan held my hand. He spoke softly, "Don't worry, the police are quick in these situations. It'll be okay." He squeezed my thumb. "You always pick at your fingers when you're scared." I didn't even realize. Remember that time we had hot pot and then decided to walk down the stairs because the elevator took too long? When the voice-activated light went off, you stomped but didn't do it hard enough to turn it back on, and you looked really flustered when the light came back on. You were picking at your finger just like now. That's when I realized, you're scared of the dark. I looked at my hand. So that's why he sang those silly songs so loudly afterward. I thought he was just goofing around. That little distraction calmed my nerves a bit. Evan drove quickly. By the time we arrived, the safety cushions were already in place. I approached a police officer. "Hi, I'm his sister." "What's going on?" "The person in distress is very unstable and has asked to see someone named Mandy." "You should call your family now." "I'm Mandy." "Then get up there quick." The officer hurriedly explained while walking. "Try to calm him down and get him away from the edge. We need you to cooperate for the rescue. This school has been abandoned for a while, and there are many risks. Be careful yourself." He turned to Evan. "And you?" Evan pointed at me. "I'm her family." "All right then, don't let him see you. He only wants to talk to Mandy." "Got it." Evan followed silently. When I walked up to Tim with a flashlight, he sensed my presence. "You're here. Tim, come down first." "Mandy, I dreamed that we got married last night. I finally became successful, but because of a fight on set, someone tied you up overnight. Then, you went missing. The police said you fell off a cliff." My throat tightened. It was just a dream. Was it? Tim looked agitated. "Why did you suddenly change so much then? Why did you stop liking me? You found me annoying. You should be happy to be rid of me, right?" "Yeah," he exclaimed, turning around. "I thought I should be happy too. I've been annoyed by you since we were kids. My parents only paid attention to work, but when you came, everything changed. They started caring about me. Even Grandpa, who loved me the most, only focused on you. He even entrusted your future to me before he died." "Mandy, I hate when people take what's mine. I hate being forced to do things, and you managed to do both. How could I not hate you?" I watched his precarious stance, too scared to respond. After a tense silence, he smirked bitterly. "But why did it hurt so much when you said you wouldn't marry me? I saw your picture on Amy's Twitter and realized you never smiled like that around me. Mandy, have you been unhappy all these years in my house?" I shook my head. "You all provided me a home. Your parents were very kind, and Grandpa. Even more so." "That's not what I asked. Were you happy?" "Tim, someone like me doesn't have the luxury to worry about feelings. Being able to go to school and grow up safely was already a blessing." Tim was silent for a few seconds before rubbing his face in frustration, looking around. "Do you remember this place?" "Yes, you used to come here to read and forget about meals. I'd bring you food." He shook his head. "I didn't really forget the time. I just enjoyed the moments you came in." "Mandy." Tim finally stepped away from the edge and ran over, gripping my shoulders. "Can we start over? I'll cherish you and make it up to you." I interrupted him. "Tim." He froze. Though he was a few months older than me, I had never called him brother. I looked into his eyes. "If you believe that dream so much, you already ruined my life once. Are you going to destroy it again?" Tim's whole body went rigid. Pain and confusion flashed across his face before he let go of me and stumbled back, collapsing onto the ground. From a while ago, the police who had surrounded Tim rushed over to help him up. Tim looked up, his lips trembled for a moment but he didn't say anything. In the end, he let others take him away with a numb expression. I looked at the spot where Tim had been standing. There was a cake there, no longer recognizable, and the candles looked like they had been lit. For some reason, my previously calm mindset suddenly collapsed. All the grievances from my past life rushed to my heart, and I squatted on the ground crying. Someone came over to ask what was going on but seemed to be dismissed. A big coat was thrown over my head, covering everything, and I cried even more freely. Finally, I was exhausted from crying. Sniffling, I whispered, "Evan? My legs are numb." The person beside me bent down to pull me up. Having squatted for too long, I couldn't stand and fell into his arms. Evan chuckled, "Mandy, are you up to something?" I wrapped my arms around his waist and rubbed my head against his chin. "Evan, now this is up to something." The next second, Evan responded to my cheekiness with action. He lifted my chin and shook it back and forth as if admiring me. "It's rare, crying like a frog but still so charming." The accusation was cut off by a passionate kiss. When I was almost out of breath, Evan finally let go of me. He looked around and smiled. Sure enough, nothing ever goes as planned. The scene I had in mind was much more romantic. Evan brought his forehead to mine. "Mandy, I like you. Want to date?" I pulled back a bit and looked down. "Evan, I'm an orphan. The birthday you celebrated for me today isn't my actual birth date. It's just the date the orphanage recorded when I was admitted. Later, I was adopted." Evan rubbed the back of my hand as he silently listened to the story of my early life. When I finished, I didn't dare to look up, afraid I'd see pity in his eyes. "Mandy." He hooked my chin with his fingers, lifting it up. "Why are you so likable? Your voice is so nice. Maybe you could start a podcast?" Those eyes were filled only with bright love. I hugged him again. "Evan, let's date." The result of spending the night on the rooftop was that I caught a cold. Evan, having just finished a competition and with plenty of free time, took it upon himself to take care of the patient and visited me every day. By now, I was almost recovered, but he was still sticking around while he was cooking. Amy had already spilled a bunch of juicy details to me. She said her brother had been scheming for a long time, using money to bribe her for information to woo me. I replied, "You really lack resolve, huh? That's money we're talking about." Amy said righteously. My phone was suddenly snatched away. Evan glanced at it and said, "Stop talking to that dimwit. Is that any way to talk about your sister?" I took a sip of the porridge he handed me and leaned in closer. "Did you fall in love with me at first sight?" Another spoonful came my way. Yeah. What was initially meant to tease me ended up shocking me. "What did I do to catch your eye that day at the boxing gym?" Evan raised an eyebrow. "Who said it was that day?" "Then when was it?" "Not telling." I leaned in and kissed him. "Can you tell me now?" Evan put down the bowl and kissed me back, holding the back of my head. After we parted, he whispered in my ear, "Nope. Figure it out yourself." Before I could say more, he tapped his watch. "Get dressed, we're heading out." Unlike in my previous life, this time when I stood in front of Grandpa William's grave, I truly had nothing to complain about. Evan was waiting at the steps not far away. I took a glance at him and babbled to Grandpa about so many things, about Evan, Amy, my new book, and how different my life was compared to my previous one. After over an hour of talking, I softly said, "Grandpa, that's all for today. I'll come chat with you again." Running over to Evan, I said, "Let's go." He ruffled my hair. "Hold on." Then he went up to Grandpa's grave, said something, and quickly returned. On the way back, I swung his hand. "What did you say to Grandpa?" "It's a secret." "When exactly did you fall in love with me?" "Not telling." "Evan, too many secrets are bad for communication. Why don't you try and coax me? Maybe I'll spill if I'm in a good mood." "How should I coax you?" Evan leaned to my ear and said something that made my cheeks burn. I let go of his hand and quickly ran ahead. "You're blushing already? Mandy, you need to toughen up." Evan's epilogue. Every time I see Love at First Sight on TV, I can't help but curse. It's just lust at first sight dressed up all fancy. Until I met her. Last summer, during those scorching days, Amy called me and asked me to bring her something at school. My unregistered car couldn't get through the school gate. The heat was unbearable, and I was silently cursing that brat Amy all the way to her department. Suddenly, a bright spot intruded into my view. At the corner ahead, there stood a girl in a mint green shirt dress. Her ponytail was high up, one hand shading her eyes from the sun, the other holding a clear box. She occasionally looked down and gave a goofy smile at whatever was in her hand. Seriously, what's so fascinating about that simple craft? I knew my destination like the back of my hand, but that day, I found myself walking up to her. "Hi, could you tell me how to get to the performance department office?" She turned her head, her smile still lingering, lighting up her entire face. "Just keep walking straight and turn right ahead. You'll see it." "Thanks." She looked past me at someone, waving. "No need to thank me." I stood there, watching her excitedly run towards a guy, handing him the box like it was something precious. "So, she has a boyfriend, huh?" My first love ended before it even began. That night, back home, I changed the door code to that day's date like a crazy person. I thought that was the end of our story. This year, my parents started nagging me again about studying management. I refused, so they threatened to kick me out. Amy joined in the teasing, so I confiscated her gaming console. In retaliation, she listed my small apartment online for rent. I didn't care, no one's renting my place anyway. Anyone who tries, I'll kick their ass. Seeing her at the club made my blood boil. "What did you say, Amy? She wants to rent my place? My crappy apartment has such value? Rent it out ASAP." That day, in a friendly match, I showed off all my best moves. No idea if she even noticed. Seeing her reminded me of that first glimpse of mint green. She felt like a refreshing summer rain, making you want to smile just thinking of her. Since we met again, it felt like fate. I couldn't let her slip away. Pulled Amy aside. "What's her name?" "Mandy." "Does she have a boyfriend?" Amy looked suspicious. "Why?" "She's renting my place. I need to know if she'll bring people over all the time." I replied quickly. "No, but she has a crush, well known in our department. She used to live with that guy. Now she's moving out, so they're probably done." Amy said. "How did they live together without being together?" "It's complicated." Amy briefly explained Mandy and Tim's relationship. I transferred some money to Amy. "Show her the place ASAP, no more questions." Amy jumped. "You're not broke yet? I've got enough investments to live off for years, okay?" Mandy signed the lease eagerly. Maybe she likes me too. So, I tentatively sent her the door code. After a while, she replied asking if she could change it. Of course, she should change it for her own safety. I typed and deleted, struggling to settle on what to say. Finally, I sent, "You don't remember me?" Then quickly retracted it. What if she doesn't remember me at all? How embarrassing. Typed again, "Remember that hot day last July 12th when a handsome guy asked you for directions?" Deleted again. Too silly. After much toiling, I sighed. Typed, "Mandy, my apartment says it's happy you're staying. So am I." Sent. Couldn't sleep. I started cleaning downstairs. The place was regularly cleaned, but I wanted it to be perfect for Mandy. For the first time, I cleaned an entire apartment myself. The next day, I took Amy to a furniture store, asking her to help pick a vanity and some rugs. "Look, this yellow is nice," Amy pointed to a swatch. I pulled out a mint green one. "This one, she'll like it." "You're acting weird." "Silly, your brother is courting someone. You're getting me a sister-in-law?" She chirped. "Are you going to confess?" "When?" "Slowly, don't freak her out." I replied gently. Amy covered her mouth. "You freaked me out already." Mandy and Amy hit it off, becoming close quickly. Once again, I was dragged home for another lecture. I caught a glimpse of a message from Mandy on Amy's phone. "Coming over today?" If my sister were a guy, I'd be suspicious of Mandy's loyalty. I wasn't jealous at all. I replied, "What's up?" "I want some black pepper pork chops from the cafeteria." I almost texted, "Why don't you ever ask me so sweetly?" But stopped, remembering it was Amy's phone. Quickly replied, "Okay." Interrupted my mom's nagging, "I need to go with your future daughter-in-law now. Can we continue this later? I'm getting a daughter-in-law." I showed her a photo I had secretly taken. Her eyes lit up. "Go. Don't come back until you get her." My parents lived a bit far from her school, so it took some time. As much as I liked Mandy, I wanted to take things slow, afraid of scaring her off. But hearing her talk to that Tim guy freaked me out. Amy said Mandy liked him for years. "Can I be your future?" I asked nervously. She seemed equally nervous, but saying it felt like a relief. I truly liked her. Only her. If she needed time, I'd wait. No problem. I liked her that much. I first felt Mandy might like me too outside the venue during the state competition. Her ears turned red, but she still smiled shyly. Then I remembered her birthday was coming up. It was time to confess. But Tim showed up again, causing trouble. I stood behind the rooftop door, hearing their entire miserable conversation. I don't have the right to be picky about life. Being able to study and grow up safely is enough of a blessing. Hearing this made me want to cry for the first time. Later, Mandy shared her past with me in detail. I realized how amazing she was. She didn't need pity, she deserved the best love in the world. At the cemetery, I specifically thanked my grandpa. Thanked him for being a part of Mandy's difficult childhood. Thanked him for giving her his unique affection. William's epilogue: when Tina brought that little girl back, I was happy. People either live for hope or for ties. With such a lovely girl around, Tina might find a reason to get back on track. Mandy was incredibly well behaved. She always smiled at everyone. Never asked for anything, never cried. Even when she had a high fever, she'd get up to prepare milk and cookies for Tina, urging her to eat something. Wearing clothes several sizes too big, she'd still cheerfully compliment her aunt's taste. Once, I took her out for some fried chicken. She stared at the menu for a long time and only ordered fries. Her reason? "Grandpa, I'll order this because my pocket money is enough to pay you back." Later, when Tina died right in front of Mandy, I was worried she'd be scarred, so I contacted a doctor. After the first session, she came out holding my hand. "Grandpa, don't worry about me. I'll live well. No need for the doctor, they charge so much money. I'll pay you back when I grow up." My heart melted completely. She was young but seemed to understand everything. When I brought her home, my son and daughter-in-law initially disagreed. But if we didn't take care of Mandy, what would happen to her? Go back to the orphanage? If that happened, I wouldn't die in peace. Eventually, my son and his wife relented. They saw how pitiful the girl was and treated her quite well. My health held up too, and I lived to see the kids go to college. Everyone knew Mandy liked Tim. Actually, that kid Tim liked Mandy too. He just didn't realize it himself. Before I passed, I meddled and made them promise to marry and take care of each other. What a mistake that was. Mandy would visit my grave frequently to talk. At first, it was okay. But later, she cried every time. In all those years, I never saw her cry much. Yet after marrying Tim, she was so unhappy. All the money spent on Mandy since she was little came from my pension. She didn't owe anyone anything and shouldn't have to suffer. I was about to send Tim a dream. Then, I saw Mandy at the gates of hell. I rubbed my eyes, scared I was seeing things. The next moment, my eyes welled up. It was Mandy, but for some reason, her soul was shattered. I asked a colleague to investigate and found out what she went through that night. I sacrificed my reincarnation to send Mandy back 4 years. Child, Grandpa won't be able to hear your visits to my grave